Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you for attending this joint committee of Association of South Essex Local Authorities. Sorry we're running a few minutes late. We just had to get a couple of technology issues sorted out there, but we're now in business. So let's kick off at item 1. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Wotton and Councillor Kevin Bentley. Is there anybody else that I'm not mentioning who's given apologies? We all... You also have apologies from Councillor Blackwell. Sorry, yeah, Angela was just indicating, I'm sure, for the same. Thank you. I didn't realise that. Sorry, I've missed that.
Very glad you've opportunity South East, but I think Mr. Bryant's here in his place.
Yeah.
Rob Polking, all the Chief Executive of South End of Sea, but Alan Richards is deputising this morning.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Alan. Okay, in the absence of Councillor Wotton, who's normally the Vice Chair, I've asked Councillor Baggett to Vice Chair for me, so if that can be agreed, that's why Andrew's sitting next to me. Is that agreed? It is indeed. Lovely, thank you. So Andrew will ably assist me while I get through this agenda. Minutes of the previous meeting, declarations of interest. We all know the procedural rules around that. If there's any item on the agenda where there's an interest, then please declare that at the outset of the item, and we'll see where we stand with that from a governance point of view. Okay, item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Members have all got a copy of the minutes of the last meeting. Really, all we're looking for is to agree that they're a correct record of what took place on the 15th of December. I feel like we've met as a joint committee since then, but we haven't. But we have met as ASELA a few times since then. Is that right? Seems much longer ago than I thought. Okay. So are members happy that that I sign those as a correct record of the meeting? Okay. All right. Item 4, the first sort of meaty item on the agenda today, is our ASELA programme review and reset. This is a report that Scott's put together for us. There are actually 4 recommendations in this report, and you'll see them bottom of page 7 and top of page 8. So I'm going to move those recommendations. I'm not going to read them out because hopefully everyone can see what they are. But it's about recognising what we've done to date. I won't read them out in full anyway. Looking at endorsing the proposal around the new work streams, revised structure and resourcing to support the delivery. There's quite a big item that I want us to get into and discuss on that, the resource implications of these work streams. And also, it was a suggestion that was made last time, and I've got that underway, is that we invite the LGA to come in and do a corporate peer review. Be interesting how they do it, because I don't know, they may have done similar for combined authorities, but I don't know if they've done that before. So I certainly wrote a letter to Kevin. Kevin was sitting on the LGA board, I think, but I wrote as chair to request that we'd like to have one. I don't know how that went down, actually. I don't know if anyone's got any update as to whether Kevin put that at the management committee or the board of the LGA and how they responded. Tom, do you think you could find out for us? Because I think he got the letter, then he met. It just would be good to have some feedback on that, because I think that would be a good exercise. So there's the 4 recommendations that I'll move from the outset. I'm sure, Andrew, you're happy to second those. Yep. So that's good. So we've got those in motion, so to speak. Scott, do you want to add anything to this report, or should we just get into discussing what we've got in front of us?
Yeah, I think...
We just have that between the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As you said there, it's a quite comprehensive report. You've read out the recommendations. I think just a bit of context that obviously this has come from 2 sessions you said there of let's say South Essex leaders and chiefs coming together about reviewing ASELA and where they wanted to take ASELA in light of changing landscapes, particularly around the Greater Essex devolution deal and what we were trying to achieve, and put more impetus behind the ASELA programmes. Hence why you'll see recommendations around resources and how we've recalibrated it to really embed it in the councils as a whole. I'm sure happy to talk about certainly the theme I'm leading and progress made already, and how the collaboration has always started to happen. Something that the South Essex leaders are very keen, particularly around the growth and investment and economy theme, that how we work as a sort of shared service. So lots of good work going ahead. I think the report's quite clear in terms of what the key themes are, what they're trying to achieve, and I'm sure that any chief that we've already, as I say, started to have those conversations, ready to come back in the new financial year to more focus to the 5 themes. And as I said, just on the skills, economy and jobs theme, which is the one that I'm chief exec sponsor, we've met with our sponsor, Councillor Bentley. We've had 2 meetings of officers, we've had terms of reference agreed, and I'm really pleased to say that already we've got 4 areas for joint working around skills, business support and network, and I know that's an item we will talk about later on around the future business support and sector development. And, you know, great news for Basel this week around receiving 4.9 million for a creative arts and digital opportunity, but will be around supporting South Essex skills rather than just Basildon as young people. So some really good work, how we as a group are starting to collaborate, and I'll look forward to bringing you a further update on that theme as other chiefs will, Chairman. But happy to take any more questions or, as you say, get into the report.
Okay, any comments or questions on the report? I've got a few, but I just wondered if there's anything from the floor to get us started. Councillor Cockshaw.
Page 9 of the report, the Freeport, just to update everyone, obviously this week it got full business case approval, so it's a great news that the Freeport, Thames Freeport is now been approved by the government so we can move forward at pace, I hope, in the economic development and making sure we now have the great news of actually 2 Freeports in Essex.
Yeah, that was a welcome update. It was a welcome result. It really puts us in a good stead and supports, but it's a nice boost to our economic growth theme, isn't it, to get that result? So that is definitely welcome. Anything more specifically on the report before I get into it a little bit more? I think the thing for me in this report is probably the latter part. We've done a lot of the work on understanding what our work streams are, and we're agreed with that. We wouldn't be sitting here now with this report in front of us if we haven't done all the prep work to bring that to where it is. But I think where the discussion should evolve is around having agreed all of the ambition we've got, how we want to structure it, who's going to lead on it from a chief point of view, from a leader point of view and everything else, is actually, the comment I've got is I think we all recognise that we're pretty busy in our own right, either being chief execs of councils, leading our own councils, sometimes chief execs of joint councils. So there's a lot on. And at the same time, we are dependent on the self-same officers with the support of other people in their own organisations to progress some of the projects and the programmes that we've had going on so far. But if we're going to really start to get serious about driving these strategic programme areas forward, then there is a need to resource it properly. I think in the past we've had resource, we've brought resource in, and they've been for specific projects, and those projects such as Sea Park, you know, moved ahead certainly to a point, a tangible point. And other notable projects that we've moved forward where we've bought, and we'll see some of them around the digital infrastructure later, but we've had some good expertise helping us take those projects forward. But if we're going to join all this together, then we really need to look seriously at how we resource it. And I think at the back end of this report, or the latter part of the report rather, it starts to pick up on, if I just go past the individual work streams, ASELA resources, bottom of page 16, starts at paragraph, or chapter 4, paragraph 4.1, where there is a proposal here for 2 posts, an ASELA director and ASELA programme officer. Scott, do you want to, I know it's in the report, but do you just want to at a high level talk us through the logic and thinking around the need for those posts? And then I think there might be a question on if we're going to go forward with that, because that is the recommendation we've moved here, how would we recruit to those? Would it be on a contract basis? Would it be on a permanent? Because later in this report, I won't dwell on it now because it's a pink item, but later in agenda item 8, we might be looking at some of the implications of where we sort of need to transition sometimes in terms of the resource we've got. So there might be some questions and concerns about how we go about that. That one, yeah.
Apologies. There you go. Sound like full council asked the question. Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a good analysis you started there. I think you're right that we're all busy in our own places dealing with various different issues. We've also supporting as officers, the Greater Essex Devolution bid as alongside that. So we need to be mindful of where ASELA is going and how we are going to achieve those ambitions that you set from the 2 away days. And I think even as officers, we've reflected on what worked well previously, and we've been too reliant on sometimes chief exec officers with consultants or contractors that are not embedded in place. So the purpose of the reset was to involve a broader set of officers within the organisations, but there is also then a need for a full-time role that weaves all of this together, because from the themes, as you know, they do overlap a lot. There'll be projects that will move from one theme to another theme, and we've identified already that they are intertwined. So how do we make sure we avoid duplication, as well as how do we make sure that we are engaging with government? We're working alongside the Greater Essex Devolution deal. So we felt there was a need there for a full-time role to really direct us and help us deliver these ambitions and work with all of the organisations rather than someone being coming from one organisation. That being said, what we've said in this report, we've left it the way it is because we can look at what is out there in terms of, is there a secondment opportunity of a director with those skills? If there is, I'm not sure there is one in South Essex, because they're probably already working on some of these major programmes in their individual in places. But if there is, that could be an opportunity. If there is resources that come available that have the right skills match, then they could be going through this. But equally, we want to be ambitious, as you rightly said, Chairman, to actually want to recruit someone, because ASELA has a programme over the next few years to deliver these ambitions. But we're also mindful, working with Tom Walker, we know who's leading on the Greater Essex Devolution deal, how this will work with any devolution deal if successful in May 25. So it's quite a complex recruitment needed, but we do think it's really important if we really are to achieve these ambitions in a timeline that members set to be ambitious, to be brave, to be bold, then we do need to actually get the right resource to help deliver this programme. The programme officer, there may be more of an opportunity to get a secondment within the organisations, but I do believe we may find it more difficult to recruit from within for the ASELA director, so we should then go out to recruit. And whether that, again, Chairman, is on a 2-3 year fixed term, happy to take members' feelings on that into account, but obviously the more fixed it is, more difficult sometimes to recruit in a very difficult area of recruitment. So growth, is quite difficult to recruit people with the good skills. But so I do think that hopefully that helps answer your question.
Thank you. I've got a couple of other questions, but I want to turn to other members of the Joint Committee first, if they've got anything to add or question. If not, I will steam straight on ahead. In terms of the recruitment, Councillor Coxall, let me go to you first.
Yeah. Because obviously my concern I've raised in other forums where there's joint works, and I can see this works here with the Greater Essex Devolution, with our other work. How are we going to make sure, and this programme manager could be helpful to that, and you've got, again, in page 11, talks about, in the skills and agenda, about how working with the growth board, as well as that, I think both of us sit on the growth board each year, and and how we can do with that. Is this programme manager going to do with that external relations, or is that part of it? Because I couldn't see, and I can see the programmes to deliver our agenda, but then what is at the moment is shared across all chief executives or all any other officers and using. Yeah, where does that do? Will this do duplicate across others or not?
Again, happy to answer that question, Chairman. 2 points really. First of all, I should have said on the first point, the roles themselves will be recruited by this joint committee, so they are responsible to the joint committee directly. They will then lead on the programmes, and what they will do is exactly your point, Councillor Coxall, look at where is there duplication already and overlap, actually provide that synergy. So if we're already getting some comments on projects, they would feed through this overall programme director. So the idea of this is because already we have in Homes England some funding around a project support officer, they will obviously then report through the overall director. So the idea is not to then have 5 different separate programmes that create duplication. But the programme director will effectively report to this joint committee as a joint appointment, and will prioritise whatever the themes in terms of its delivery ambitions, and then we will realign. The chiefs will obviously support that through the chiefs meeting, but it will be the director reporting to this committee rather than to the chief execs moving forward in terms of the prioritisation and ambition.
That answer your point, Councillor Coxon. Just on that, we talked about it, we started to go there, but I don't know if it's clear or explicit in this report. Are we talking about ASELA as the employer? Because where we've got resource at the moment, we've got different councils supporting the organisation off their own head count, like the Secretariat for Southend and Finance and bits and pieces. So are we looking to employ directly as ASELA? And if so, what do we need to change to do that? Do we need to become a body? I know we're a joint committee, but we're not an employer as such. So how would that work?
Again, at this current stage, I mean, these are questions, good questions that we will resolve. At the current stage, the appointment we've made by the joint committee, report by this joint committee, but one of the constituent councils would need to pick up the payroll terms and conditions, and then we would have to have an agreement for this joint committee around that at the outset, because there is not a requirement needed. It wouldn't be value for money to set up a whole company based on one or two roles. As this evolves, if it grows, subject to the Great Devolution deal and the growth service that Councillor Coxall spoke about, it may be at some stage that ASELA does then start to employ people directly. We set up all of the support resources to do that, but it doesn't seem a good idea from a value for money perspective to create all that at this stage.
Agreed with that. And just to be clear as well, from the report and then looking at the financial implications, what we're saying is the savings effectively were identified in 4.2. We've made some change of personnel we had. Is that funding that's going towards the recruitment of these positions, which then gives us the net effect that there's no additional financial implication on ASELA?
I concur, but you may want to ask the finance lead to substantiate that as well, Chairman.
Yeah, because that's how I'm reading it. I think 4.2 is the giveaway.
Thank you. Yes, obviously it depends on the exact gradings of the new role, but essentially it should be cost neutral compared to the current position.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? If not, we've got the motions or the recommendations been moved and seconded. We'll call it, there's 4 leaders here, so can I take it they're agreed in terms of what we're looking to do moving forward? Thank you, that's done. So let's move on to the next agenda item. Scott, thanks for that. Agenda item 5, there's 3 parts to this, which is to look at the progress reports on the South Essex Advanced Technical Skills. I like to see we've got a new acronym for it, Scott, that's good. And then we'll look at the housing infrastructure and then Superfast Digital. So we've got reports for all of those. I think, Jonathan, you're going to deliver a presentation on item B, aren't you? So, okay, so without further ado, SEAT. I don't know what to call it, SEAT. I'll tell you what, I'd be interested to know, Scott, we recently formed the company with 3 directors from the three sort of organisations involved. And I know you'll come out with this, but and I know that also we're in procurement at the moment for an education provider. I think that procurement window closes tomorrow. So whether there's any update you might be able to give us as to how that's the level of interest that we've seen. That's just a starter from me, but over to you.
Yeah, you've teased me up very nicely, Chairman, and almost taken most of my update there. So I wouldn't call it SEAT, bear in mind some of those founding members on the board. SEATs, as we currently call it, rather than SEAT, because it reminds me of a car that isn't necessarily aligned to our current operating company founding members. So the SEATs is a limited operating company which was established. I mean, we shouldn't underestimate how far we've come on this programme, and I really want to emphasise the brilliant joint working led by businesses to create this operating company. They have taken this at their own risk, the 3 founding members, so Ford Motor Company, DP World and Southend Airport, with Leonardo and Teva Motors supporting the employers as observers at this stage. and obviously we will grow the seats operating company as it evolves, and I'll pick that up, I'm sure, if not asked later on around those questions. So what are the core aims of the operating company? So it's to enhance the delivery of high-level technical skills in South Essex, provide opportunities for local people to secure high-skilled jobs, including providing bursaries to support South Essex residents to access employment and better career opportunities. It's to enable local firms to secure the much-needed skills they need and grow, and we have all heard both of Chief Execs and leaders over the last few years, and support the retention and attraction of high-quality firms into the area. So they're the core aims of the operating company that, as I said, is by the three founding directors. You went on then to, so we've employed some legal advisors for the operating company. So again, as I say, this is not us, this is the operating company leading this, so this is not council's funds moving forward, and I'll talk about the fund in a second. And a core part of the next stage of the work, as well as the tender that I'll touch on in a second, will be the Seats Board to develop the specification and process for the recruitment and appointment of their own executive team. So Chief Operating Officer, Stakeholder Engagement Manager, Widening Participation Manager, and Admin Support Officer. So they're the four roles that they will fund themselves to deliver the wider ambitions that we set as ASELA some time ago, which I've just touched on earlier. So we hope that the team to support the Seats Board, where at the moment we are providing some administration support in the early meetings, will be in place by September this year. So they will then even be more so running off by the businesses themselves, and that was one of the purposes of ASELA. What we set up was to actually create the opportunity, then ask partners, in this case businesses, to drive the ambitions on behalf of our South Essex leaders. So getting to the exciting part, and I say I'm really quite disappointed that Councillor Bentley isn't here, because I dare say he would be even more excited than me after attending, as part of the ITT process. We had a webinar, a Q&A session with 11 organisations that have expressed interest, and I will name the 11 if I'm able to, and to say the closing date, we aren't here yet. But just an example: Anger Ruskin, Chelmsford College, Coventry University, Cranfield University, East London University, Kent University, Hertfordshire University, Lincoln University, Oxford Brookes University, and SkillsNet are 11 organisations, as at the start of this week, that have already expressed an interest to tender and be the provider for the Seats organisation. And what was exciting about the webinar is, particularly in 3 or 4 of the questions and answer session, was this was a real partnership where skills providers were saying, we want to be this in over the 10-year long term, expand the operation beyond the first year where we've got the 60 to 80 recruits at the level 7 grade, to look at the wider need. And we were asked questions around, well, where are we going beyond the 5 businesses? And what I'm pleased to say, working with colleagues within the group that I lead, that already working with Ian Lewis from OSC, that we have 49 businesses that are signed up to be part of the next stage. So already we've got that business engagement network, I think we've currently called it, Chairman, but already 49 businesses have expressed an interest to be part of the next phase. So that's again where the operating company needs to look, where do we go beyond the first year? And equally, my challenge, I've always said, and whilst I still have some breath left in me and moving further away from the board, is how we're then going to linked intrinsically to the education in schools in the most deprived areas, to make sure schools recognise this opportunity for their young children in some of these future careers, which is much needed for the businesses. And my final point, Chairman, happy to take questions, is that thank you very much to Thames Freeport Governing Board, who have provided the investment of £240,000 and supported the business plan with a further additional £570,000 if needed for the operating company in future years. So it was also about pump priming this, very well supported by the Thames Freeport, because ultimately it's in their plan. With 21,000 jobs coming out of Freeport, they do need a skills provider of this sort of magnitude. And as I say, two of the providers are already talking about the next stages and how they work in partnership. So effectively, the operating company may have a university provider that is also working in partnership with other skills providers to provide the operating company's need. So true collaboration now from a skills providers rather than all competing, which has been some of the challenges in the past. Chairman, I could talk all day, as you know, about this, but I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Councillor Baggett, yeah, please.
Thank you. I don't mean to ambush Mr. Logan here, and I'm sure I could have asked him this question maybe on the car on the way over here. But in the world of augmented reality, virtual reality, immersive technology and synergistic entertainment process, I don't even pretend to understand half of it. What I do know is that Basildon recently has been very, very fortunate to have been awarded £4.9 million by the Arts Council for setting up a digital immersive screen technology venue and to actually then develop jobs and all the support industries that go with it. So my question is, which proves why I don't understand this whole thing, with SEAT, is there any opportunities or ability to be working with them and actually being complementary to what's going on in that particular venue, or is this something that would be completely separate?
You could have asked to be the car vice chairman, but I'd be happy to give you the same answer I've done in the car. Of course, yes, it is complementary, and of course, if you look what I mentioned earlier around the evolving programme, so we have set up the project itself for the skills programme was to set up this operating company, Technical University Seats, as it's now called, but which was always about actually sending the right ambitious message around a real urgent need, but was to evolve the programme beyond that. And so one of the four themes that the group that I chair, I said earlier, on the skills, investment and economy theme is looking at where is then the investment areas. So the investment area you're talking about is actually how do we collaborate across South Essex's offices to exploit the opportunity, as you just described, and make sure that then it relates to the operating company, which already, to be fair, the South Essex College are already skilling young people up to. So the answer is yes, it's already in part of the work programme for the South Essex Growth Service.
Okay, any more?
Mark.
Councillor Cockshaw.
A couple of things. Obviously, the Freeport's been got full business case now, and I see in item 3.9, and I've just better declare that as it's been constituted a full business board, I will be a member of the business board, the Freeport board. So it better, just in case, I don't know if that's a legal officer, I should actually declare that, as this paper's asking to support 570,000 for the next stage. My question is, what on the board, and it doesn't mention, I understand the offices and it's wholly, but there's got to be some public, because there's a public-private policy, so how are we going to represent it here to bring this back as a paper and just officers? And I know it's got, how are we going to, is there board members going to become from here to be a part of that, parts of the directors? I hand Adam's here and I sit on, it's a joint partnership with businesses, and if we're going to deliver this high school, I think does need some sort of public sector or democratic involvement in the board, as in something we appoint, just very much like the go, or not. And then the next question is, what happens to the other business partners? And it's all the money is coming from seed funding at the moment. This is from, I'm assuming, from seed funding from the Freeport, but ongoing, it's not going to be a cash cow, but we've got to look at other things across there as well as the Freeport board. And we've got to make sure that this does survive. I think it's a great idea. I think this, but other members, the other businesses across the community are going to bring funding into this.
Chairman, yeah, two excellent questions. So the first one, both questions are the same really. Answer is that we are starting small, and ultimately that's why you've only got 3 or 4 providers with 80 apprentices. So the apprenticeship levy itself will not self-fund in the early years as it grows. But within, I think it's projected within about years 4 to 5 that it will pay for itself because of the growth through the other wider businesses. The apprenticeship levy funding will be will pay for itself, and that's why we need the resources to go out and be the next cohort and grow it. I'd be clear that this will go similar to what Councillor Baggett said, where is the skills need based on the higher jobs for South Essex, which clearly 21,000 jobs coming out of Freeport, well, maybe around logistics or maybe around digital, but maybe we don't know, and we need to evolve it and work in partnership with Freeport. So I think there will always be a long relationship with the Freeport founding members on the board, but the idea is obviously that Freeport will back off and actually other businesses will come into the board. The board will get broader and the business group sitting below the board will be maybe made up of 40, 50 different businesses who will bring their need in, bring their funding in, and it's self-sustaining. Your other question is an excellent question, so at the moment there's 3 members and we are helping dramatically. When we are in a position in September to them to have their own resources, then I call it an observer. There will be public sector observers on the board to hold them to account on what we agreed through the terms of reference of what we're trying to achieve. So there will be observers from the public sector, which will be leaders from ASELA, as an example, which will come back to as this evolves during the summer. So that was always the aim, and certainly, as I said before, this is a true partnership. The businesses want public sector to be involved on the board as observers, but because it's an operating company, we can't be founding members. So hopefully that answers your question.
Councillor Cockshaw, does it? Yeah. Does? Oh, sorry.
I just want to ask a question on that, because there is a possibility to be observer status, but I'm just nervous that this is a spun out and it's come from this board and it comes out and it's a limit. I understand it's a limited company, but there's obviously ways of getting around a limited company and making sure that there's sitting there as a director. And I look at that and I think Freeport money is still public money, and there's no, let's take it away and come back. Let's make sure that some of that is, at the moment, is still public sector money. I haven't seen DP World or I haven't seen Ford's money. That's still public money. And we need to then make sure that it's not just that. That board has to have some sort of fair and answerable to someone.
Again, Councillor Cockshaw, I agree. I think we need to come back with you to demonstrate that is the case. And again, to be fair, as you said, Freeport will have some requirements of the operating company if they're funding it as well, which would go through public sector board itself. So we are expecting some requirements from the Freeport if they're funding of what the operating company does on their behalf, which will again have to satisfy yourself as a member of the board of Freeport. So I can completely agree on both accounts.
Okay, thank you. Question for me, just looking through the report, we're still looking to open the doors, inverted commas, to the unit in September. We're still on track to do that?
Yes.
Fine. And I know there's lots going on at the moment. There's an executive team to be appointed. You're going through the recruitment, the procurement process. In terms of students, just remind me, what sort of numbers are we potentially looking for? And is it the companies that themselves that are going to source those and bring them to the programme?
Yeah, so again, another good question, which was raised obviously by the providers on the call. So so the numbers are around between 60 and 90 in the first year. They are already going to be employed by those founding business members and the 2 observers. So they will be employed anyway. And so the skills providers will get these from September to start their 4-year degree apprenticeship course. So it's not been for the, excuse me, it's not for the skills provider to provide the recruits. It is in the current direction of travel, and because of the pace, as you said, Chairman, the businesses were already committed to recruit some. They're taking further ambitions to do it because they want to put their energy behind this programme. And in future, I dare say, one of the reasons again why we need, or why they need to have resources, is that how then they work with the skills providers to find these recruits, because it's not always easy to do so, that are work ready for the future jobs. So at the moment it is done directly by Fords. They will employ their own people, but I'm hoping in future it will be the operating company would pick some of this work up as well, Chairman.
Thank you. And then just one final question for me. If we're just looking at the next steps, I know Councillor Cockshaw's talked about the board and stuff on seats and everything else, but when we when the joint committee reconvenes, I think probably in June time, the procurement exercise will have been completed. That's a delegated responsibility to officers. You guys will come back to the joint committee and say, this is who we're going with as a HE provider. There's no board involvement or joint committee involvement in that process, or is there? Have I missed that? But you'll just tell us that's who the successful HE provider was.
So, Chairman, I think Councillor Coxall asked a question. I think I could answer both in the same way. Is that the public sector is facilitating this procurement.
Yeah.
The public sector is involved in procurement, so we're done through a proper process, and there'll be scoring and all the normal ways, and then there will be a referred bidder, but ultimately the operating company, so those businesses will select that final university or universities, so this doesn't rule out, but there will be we'll be able to come back to you with the scoring, we'll be able to come back to you with the details, but ultimately this is done in partnership, so it will not be an ASELA decision on that university, which is always the purpose. However, our officers are heavily involved, and again, particularly thanks to Essex County Council providing some expertise in this area, and we've got consultants that we have funded to make sure we get the right outcomes that we're desiring as the public sector bodies.
Fine. So, effectively, the joint committee, probably by June, will be informed of the outcome, effectively. That's it. Okay, that's fine. So, unless there's anybody else, if I just draw members' attention or the joint committee's attention to the next steps on page 25, and ask did you want to come back, sorry, on something else?
Sorry, Chairman, I just think it's really important at this point, because there's one thing that leaders made it abundantly clear, and particularly with my leader sitting next to me, is we need to communicate this effectively.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say, although Councillor Bentley isn't here, we do have a subject to this meeting and endorsing this. There will be a press release today around the exciting news I've just said, which has already been signed off by Councillor Bentley and myself, and that will be sent out hopefully today. I'm looking at Karen. And then the idea is this will be cascaded across all of the leaders to actually then be able to support this, because this is a South Essex success through ASELA. It's really important that we talk about this, because, as you rightly said, sometimes people do not understand what we're doing. We just have nice meetings, and this has been a massive public sector, private sector achievement that would not have been achieved if we didn't have ASELA.
Agreed, and I'm sure we'll touch on that in the comms item as well, as there's a couple of items. There's a couple of stories, and it's good when these things start to come to fruition, and you're absolutely right, we need to maximise the voice on this very successful outcome. I'm sure it will be anyway. Brilliant. Okay, so unless there's anything else to add, if we just note the next steps that are in highlighted on page 25, and then we'll move on to the next update, if that's okay. So we haven't got this in our report, but I think, Jonathan, you've prepared, obviously, a PowerPoint for us. So over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. So I've got hopefully very quick presentation to give you a bit of an overview of where we are with the Good Homes programme, which has been retitled as part of the review and reset. The reason I brought the presentation today is to give a bit of a review since we've got the funding from Homes England, which was confirmed in September 2022. We've accelerated quite a lot of the work, and it was good to bring this to this committee to review where we've gone so far and the plans for the next steps. This presentation will be shared after the meeting and will be part of the minutes as well. If I can change them. Where's that?
It's okay.
Okay.
So on YouTube.
Just on here.
Yeah. Sorry. You can use the left or right arrow.
Left to right. Brilliant. Thank you. Just had my IT lesson. So, contents of the presentation can be around the programme reset, the achievements to date, and the delivery plan of the work we're doing with local authorities and housing associations, and a quick overview of the funding to date we've received, whether it's directly or indirectly from Homes England as our strategic partner. So, the programme reset. This visual hopefully gives everybody a quick, easy overview of what we're trying to achieve within the Good Homes programme. There's three elements. One element being the new homes and communities, and that's looking about our high volume growth areas where we're looking at garden villages or new settlements. Some of those already have been approved through local plans, such as Dunton Hills. So that's one key area in how we work together around new communities and how we work together around bringing the infrastructure that will help us support growth. So, for example, looking at both ends of the A127 and looking at Dunton Hills right through to Sutton of a potential new settlement and seeing how we can work together with both those high volume community new settlements and how they can help provide upgrades of our infrastructure. There's also the accelerating delivery part of the programme, which is around the sites that we're aware of that have been difficult to deliver through viability and even more difficulty with the current economy and situation with high inflation. So how we can work jointly to accelerate those sites, because if we can deliver those sites, whichever area of the 6 of local authorities they are in South Essex, they're bringing forward vital homes that are already agreed in local plans. So those sites should come forward first. And then the last element but key is not to leave anybody behind, looking at improving existing homes and how we can do that, not just around the green credentials around sort of retrofitting and supporting our residents having a right to sustainable energy, but also looking at how we can support those residents that we're building new, shiny properties, hopefully moving forward, but actually how do we look at our stock together to ensure space standards, high quality of housing and homes are improved, and how we improve it again, the sustainability moving forward for those residents. And for example, a figure that might be helpful for this room is, and we're working with Homes England and government partners on this, is it costs the NHS 1.3 billion in people that access the NHS for living in a cold home. So actually, how can we look to convert some of that cost to the NHS in providing high quality, good homes for our residents? So a quick overview, the strategic partnership was signed off last year. The funding came forward in September, and that's when we can start to deliver the 3 outcomes of the strategic partnership with Homes England, which is a collective view of housing delivery in South Essex, targeted place-based engagement and resources, and to accelerate homes together. This is an overview that breaks down those 3 core themes, and I won't go into every detail of here, but it gives you an idea of where everything is picked up within the programme and the project. So, for example, the new homes and communities, the joint strategic framework work fits in there, and the new settlements vision and digital twin. That's the work that will be done about learning about when we do deliver new settlements, the learning from the new settlements that are currently delivered within the country, but also deliver in South Essex, and how we can learn and hopefully reduce resources around new settlements in other parts of South Essex. And then accelerating housing, looking at different areas of delivering those housing, so looking at delivery capacity across our councils and how we can work together to join up to deliver that, where we're looking at really difficult, as Scott Logan talked about earlier, about difficult recruitment and retention issues around growth. That's the same in housing development as well. So actually, how can we do that together where possible? Because there's quite a lot of the resources we need together is the same resources, and can they do those viability of that work together? And there's also looking at how we can work together around productivity, around house building, looking at low carbon, MMC, and modular properties. And if we can do that, can we look at our sites together, and there's an opportunity to deliver those together? Then a key strand within this programme, but not the only strand we engage the housing associations with, is the work we're doing on targeted work we're doing with housing associations. We're working with all the key local housing associations and looking to bring involved that sanctuary as well, to create a partnership that means we're working together to deliver the same outcomes. Unfortunately, sometimes it can be a competitive space. It shouldn't be, but it can be. So we're working with Chelmer, Moat, Estuary, but also Sanctuary, looking to bring into that partnership. And for example of that benefit of that work, just those partnerships and the councils that own their own stock, that equates to 75,000 properties in South Essex that we have got control of. So when we're looking at things like retrofitting and supporting the existing homes, actually how can we do that together as one rather than in isolation? So there's a real opportunity there. And then the last one, improving existing homes, and that's around the quality of homes and what we can do together to do that, looking at state renewal, regeneration opportunities and the learning and engagement there. And last but not least, the engagement with the private sector, and I'll pick up in the presentation, and Councillor Hossett might want to pick up as well, that we've had a lot of work, a lot of interest recently about what we're doing in South Essex, that we had a key meeting this week with a number of investors that want to come into South Essex and want to understand our proposal, and that happened up in London earlier this week, so we'll give a bit of update of that as well. Just to demonstrate the governance of the programme for members in the room and members who might be watching online, and for members across the 7 authorities, the governance fits within the Joint Committee. Under that, there's a Good Homes Programme Board. That Programme Board is facilitated by a number of partners, then of course housing associations, the chair of Essex housing developers, and a number of other partners, including Homes England and all the local authorities, have the opportunity to attend the board, but there's a number of representatives on that board from local authorities. And then under that, there's also a working group that picks up some of those programmes we talked about and projects, that is, all officers from all authority engage in that process as well. So from the top down and bottom up, that's the sort of governance process for the Good Homes programme. And oversight of that, Councillor George, leader at Southend, oversees the programme as the lead sponsor as well. So we're a year on from the funding, or not even a full year actually from the funding. So a lot of the work we've talked about, and it's quite difficult for members and officers, the work we've been doing without funding has been quite challenging. Now we've got some funding from Homes England and funding from ASELA as well. It's meant we've been able to achieve some of these things and create a bit of momentum. So we've now set out the Strategic Place Partnership, and that MOU is signed. And as we've said previously, it is one of two in the country. We're not an established combined authority, but Manchester are, and they've got a partnership like this. We're a recently established joint committee, and we're now second to Manchester, or jointly with Manchester, as the only two strategic place partnerships, and that's a massive achievement. With that also, we've done work around the joint strategic framework that will hopefully become our blueprint for where we feel we need strategic infrastructure in South Essex and how we can work together with that to ensure we achieve that. There's the pipeline of housing across the sites we've identified and the work we're doing with Homes England around the funding for those. And some of those are now got up to bidding stage, where as soon as the next funding comes out of the Brownfield Fund, some of those sites will be able to put a bid immediately into that fund. Hopefully successful as well, but we're ready to go as soon as those fundings streams are announced. We've also got 5 stalled sites, identified as priority, and a package of work for each of those to accelerate those. And again, those sites are now up to bidding stage for funding. So where the viability is tipping to make them non-viable, we're looking at how we can bid with regard to, first and foremost, public sector funding, but then also looking at how we might look at private sector opportunities to help bridge the gaps there. There's monthly and bi-monthly meetings with Homes England and the ASELA board, the ASELA Homes board. The Housing Infrastructure Programme Director was appointed in October as an interim role, and Johnny Moore sitting here in the room today. The intention is, based on the discussion earlier, is to go out to the market after the election period and go out as with the roles we've just agreed earlier and this role to look on a permanent post. That is subject to looking at our next tranche of funding with Homes England and ensuring we've got sustainable funding moving forward. Also, digital twin work sounds like a small piece of work. It was a commitment of a few $100,000. We all know our local plans. There's a lot of work that goes into local plans, but this work complements local plans, which means it gives us a good foundation for the work we're going to do around large settlements within South Essex. And that's now been delivered at first stage draft report. It will be finalised very soon around that. And again, not to underestimate the work we've done with local authorities and housing associations. In this room, at least a month ago, was a second meeting of ASELA leaders and chief execs, and also housing association chief execs and chairmans, or chair people, with regard to that meeting. And the alignment of what we want to do is fantastic. The work and relationships is now building, and it sounds that should happen everywhere. It doesn't. There's housing associations that don't engage with their own local authority. So to do a game with 7 and have a partnership and agree a vision and actually now targeted outcomes, looking at least 3 sites across South Essex, is a really massive achievement to do that. So hopefully a lot more to come from that. I'm not going to go into the slides of the delivery plan, but just to give comfort, each of those programmes we've got has got a delivery programme. Each of those, there's a purpose for the work, there's activities, and there's intended outcomes. But these will be in the minutes for the meeting today, but wanted to just demonstrate there's strong governance and a strong framework for the programme within the 3 themes. So that's theme 1, that's theme 2, and that's theme 3. I don't expect you to read all those because you wouldn't have seen them on the screen anyway, but you will get these as the notes afterwards. They're already picked up in the review. The strategic objectives were picked up in the review report, which is in the pack you've got today. But these pick up the 3 themes that I've talked about earlier. Funding, important just to have oversight so everybody's fully aware. The funding to date for the Good Homes programme, as majority has come from Homes England. We've got the grant funding for the director role, which is 250k, and that's up till October. We've got discussions ongoing with Homes England around the funding for 2023-24. Even though over reality the funding they've given us last year gives us, as Tom Walker will explain, Central government gets their funding, but they don't actually get their funding in April. It normally takes quite a drawn-out process. So where we get the funding for our financial year in September last year, it's probably likely we're going to get the funding again for this post or these roles and opportunities probably later in the year. So even though budgets might be agreed, the actual funding allocations are a bit later in the year with regard to central government. So we've aligned our funding arrangements with central government so there's no gap, because previously there has been a gap in just comfort around that funding coming forward. So hopefully we'll get a new funding agreement from September 2023 as well. So far we've got grant funding for the programme director, new settlement study funding, which is 250k, which is around that work I talked about earlier, grant funding, capacity funding, and that's around the pipeline of 120k, and 145k for technical due diligence on the priority sites, which are the 5. Some of those have either been directly provided to us as ASELA, or they're being done indirectly from Homes England through their frameworks. Again, there's a lot of detail on that slide, and I'll share this with after the meeting with you all, just to give, again, comfort. There is a timeline. All the programmes have got dates for outcomes and review points, and that's in a timeline there. The future, looking at funding, we've got a programme director, which is very helpful and something that we've not had previously. Probably moving forward, we need to look at the structure around delivering some of these things, because one person alone, but we are looking at how we do that with regard to aligning our business as usual between each council and supplementing that with any additional resource we might need. But this is just an indicative idea of the sort of level of probably resource we'll need, and some of that might be multiple people within organisations undertaking that role, so it could be 2 or 3 people from the 7 authorities, or it might be one person leading that work. So a decision hasn't been made yet, we're doing that review at the moment, but that's the sort of level of probably investment we need of people's time and resource to deliver the programmes to the full potential. That's the end of the presentation. I'm more than happy to take questions.
Jonathan, if I can jump in quite quickly, just on the back of that. If you can, it's a bit of a pain, but you know your red light thing there. I can't. Thanks. That little organisational structure you showed, the anticipated, the future of the team, over what sort of time frame would you see that evolving?
Ideally, if resource was an issue, we look to put that in as soon as possible. It'll be subject to resources, but that's a conversation now with chief execs to look at how we do that with our existing resource, if we can, and what are the gaps, and if there is some gaps, how do we fund those gaps, whether that's Homes England or others. Housing associations are looking to put support in, and that includes they might put some resource in to feed some of those, to fund or resource some of those roles. We've also got a lot of interest from private sector that they might look to, because the benefit of us delivering on the homes agenda in South Essex benefits developers as well. So there may be a way that they can fund indirectly or help resource in a resourcing pool to deliver the wider objectives.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, Andrew?
Thank you, Chairman. I do appreciate that I might be starting to sound like a video loop on TikTok on this, but I've always thought that one of the benefits of ASELA is a combined voice and also the weight of a collective buy-in on various things, and the weight of more than one authority being able to say, we want this, and what it brings. And I think that we're in a unique opportunity now where we've got the ear of the major players as RSLs out there. We've been having conversations about shared services, we've been having conversations about how we can be more economical, how we can actually benefit from combined purchasing power. And I think that we have the ability to influence and talk to these RSLs about the same thing when we look at it now across the whole of South Essex rather than our individual boroughs and districts. And I'd be interested in whether we've thought about having that sort of conversation, or whether it's actually in the programme. If it has been thought about, then it would be useful to get some sort of report coming back. If it hasn't, then I would heartily endorse or suggest that we bring something in where we can start to have the conversations with them about how we can work. It could be them all working together, it could be them and us working together. I just think there is unlimited and massive opportunity there for us to get some drive some real efficiencies and get some real quick wins.
Chairman, I'll respond to that if that's okay. So the work we've done at the moment is the foundations of creating that partnership. So I think that's really, really important that we've had that relationship piece. But yes, the objective is to look at existing and new homes together. With regard to existing, if I use an example, and I've heard you mentioned this as well, Councillor, with regard to, we've got a number of housing landlords around South Essex and around the country. Why should different tenants have different standards? So if we are really going to get to a point where we want to get our existing homes to a high level standard, our future homes to high level standards, if we can work with all the RPs, housing associations and private landlords to get to that standard, because why should one person in the same street a lot of the time have a different standard to another? So that's the ambition. Getting there is going to take a little bit of time, but having everybody around the table focused on that ambition is a really good start. So.
No, thank you. That's gratifying to hear. I mean, the one thing that springs to mind to me, for instance, is mould. Now, mould is right on the, or should be at the forefront of every single local authority's mind right now. It's certainly at the forefront of the government's mind. So we've got all the local authorities now addressing mould collectively within their respective boundaries. You would hope that the RSLs are also addressing mould as an issue. But here's a real opportunity to say, right, okay, why don't we all get our heads around the table? What are we going to do about mould? How can we actually resource things to actually make it cheaper, economies of scale, etc., etc.? And let's have a conversation to actually address what is quite an important issue for our residents.
Any other comments on this? One of the things I wanted to mention, again, some of this links through, we talked previously about the SEATS programme and the great comms opportunity around that. But this partnership working piece that we're doing, the partnership, if I'm correct, was only really formed in December. We've met twice. I get a really good vibe when I'm in the room, and there's lots of, you know, the corporate people that are in the room are great to see, then having dialogue with them in the way you've just talked about, Andrew. I might be jumping ahead to item 8, but I certainly think that particular piece in itself, if you looked at ASELA as a whole, but this particular piece in itself around housing delivery, it's got a lot of headlines that can carry with it. I'm not sure we've capitalised on that yet. I'm not sure we've maximised on it. We'll discuss it maybe when we get to comms, but we really do. It's particularly on social media platforms where it's very much about partnership working, look at other organisations, businesses and corporates that we're working with. It's just, when we've got those people around the table, I just think we should make as much of it as possible, because we've had some really, really good conversations. And the fact that you talked about some of these particular sites have gone through, I think you said, to the bidding stage now. We'll pick up on it in item, whatever it is, the comms item 7 or 8, whatever it was. But any comments on that? I'm not sure we've really made enough noise about that as yet, to be honest.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to add, obviously, there's a number of elements of the programme, definitely around getting to the bidding stage. We're getting very close. There's the managing expectations piece around the bidding stage on sites and the work we're doing with the housing associations, because we are definitely, the direction of travel is really positive. What we need to just manage about the ambition here of like working across South Essex as one landlord, perhaps with multiple partners, to get a high standard, but also that communication to the public at a time we're not completely ready. I'd just be careful managing the expectations, that, because to say, an ambition is we want one standard, but it isn't there yet. So it's just trying to manage that. But there is definitely some good communication we can do around some of the bidding stage and the housing association work when we're at a sort of better stage in the process.
Any more on this item? If not, I will thank you for your update. We were going to comment on, let's just comment on what you alluded to, and I said at the beginning I'd do it. On Tuesday, I think it was, Jonathan and I and Paulette McAllister, who's done a lot of work on this, went up to London and met with, if I can remember, all the people that were in the room. There was the Good Work Company. Yeah, well, let me see you test me. I think I'll do it. I think Schroders were there, Barclays, Lloyds, the Good Work Company, obviously Octopus Investments. I think I've covered most of them, to be honest. L&G were there as well. So we were really talking to some top brands when it comes to investors or potential investors, and we made a pretty good case, particularly around this subject. It's place-based, a new phrase for me, place-based impact investment. And when you look at these big investors who want to invest in a way that does what it says on the tin, has an impact, it's a really, really exciting conversation. And I have to say, to get that many people in the room on Tuesday afternoon and just talk about South Essex was a real privilege, really. Jonathan, if you want to touch on what the takeaways from that are and what the next steps are going to be. So whilst we had a great conversation, I'm always one to say, well, okay, well, that's great. We've got some great people in the room who are really thinking positively about what we were doing. I think they were quite impressed with what ASELA's doing. But the real thing at the end of a meeting like this is, well, what are we physically going to do next that's going to make a difference to the place that is South Essex? So do you want to touch on what the takeaways were from that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So first and foremost, we as South Essex were invited, so that was even better. We weren't even asking them to come to us. They invited us. Optimus Energy hosted it, and they're very, as we know, very creative in that space at the moment around house improvement, especially around green energy. So in some ways, there was other investors that wanted to be there. We probably couldn't fit them all in, so that was what opportunity. But as an economy of over 12 billion in South Essex and 30,000 businesses, they see us exciting and see the opportunity. London's getting very full. Actually, where can they invest their capital? And this is UK capital, but also international capital looking at it as well. So a number of our programmes have started to interest them. So we're now looking at public sector finance through Homes England. We've now got a number of finance and banks interested in what we do next. We did really focus on, or quite a heavy focus on retrofitting, because there is a market out there and there is some work we need to do with our offer to government around that. There's some complications around social housing and getting to a retrofit standard. It's not as easy as to invest just £40,000 in a house and make it carbon zero overnight. So we had the discussions, but they're really keen to work with us on some pilot projects within South Essex in each area and then deliver some perhaps high volume. They can see that we've got 75,000 properties we mentioned earlier. That 75,000 properties, if you retrofit those by 40,000 a property, you're talking billions. So that's the sort of level of investment. And for a bank and institute, morally they want to do it, but financially it makes sense as well. So they're looking at opportunities. It's going to take a bit of time. We need to make sure we can proof of concept, but they are really interested and we've got a good conversation ongoing. Octopus, I think, we already should have a couple of pilot project proposals to them in a couple of months, a couple of weeks' time, and then we can bring them back to this joint committee to discuss them.
So, yeah, that was good, and it would be great to see those proposals come back. But I just wanted to let you know that just a few of us were up in London the other day really banging the drum for South Essex with some big players, and they were really excited about what we're doing. So if there's nothing else on this item, then I'll move on to item C in this agenda item, which is Superfast Digital Report Update. Neither Rob or Michael are with us, so I don't know. Okay, brilliant. Can I pass to yourself? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it'll be a fairly brief update from me because, as you say, neither Michael nor Graham here, so I can't. There's a strong act to follow there from Scott and Jonathan, but thank you. So just a reminder that this piece of work was around making sure that across South Essex that every household, business, and community facility has access to affordable full fibre digital connectivity by 2025, and the paper that you've got before you today provides quite a detailed update in relation to that whole work stream and some of those areas of work. The four key themes there to pull out from the paper: full fibre coverage for everybody by 2025, as I've mentioned, improved mobile coverage, supporting the digital agenda for public services, and digital inclusion, which also picks up a skills piece as well and links across to the work that Scott's been talking about. There's a recommendation in the report to note the progress of the digital programme and endorse the continued support to deliver it. And just to go into a little bit more detail in some of the areas, and it's interesting that you're talking about the access to funding, because there's a lot of really good discussions going on in this programme around access to funding, both public and private as well. So we started from a fairly low base and have significantly improved that in terms of the areas where coverage has been significantly improved through the programme, with a target to achieve 100% full fibre coverage across the region by 2025, which is well in excess of the government target of 85%. Very carefully prepared digitally, and then lost all my highlighting of the report. There's a very significant amount of fibre being rolled out across the area, so 200 kilometres of digital fibre rolled out across South Essex since 2020, with significant funding from DCMS and HMCLG, 6.9 million in total. The next stage of the programme looks to really link up a number of public service buildings and then bring in access to that fibre. So we've laid the dark fibre, and then the next stage through procurement, which is ongoing at the moment, is to make sure that we activate all of that and we're able to bring as many businesses and residents onto that network as we can. There's a section in the report that talks about leveraging improved public sector connectivity as well, and making sure that connectivity spans across things such as sheltered housing, village halls and community centres, and a public sector network. Importantly also, it draws in the Internet of Things piece of work, which is something that will also be important across the wider Greater Essex work as we move that forward too. There's sections in the report which talk in detail about the investment that's been drawn in and the work that's underway in terms of business engagement and digital inclusion, and also around mobile coverage and how work will be put underway in terms of regeneration, new schemes, and the housing developments that Jonathan has talked about a while ago. So, apologies, that was a bit briefer than I expected it to be, but having highlighted various sections of my report and lost them all, the last thing I want to be doing is reading it all to you. So, happy to try and take any questions, but it's very much not a specialist area for me to cover today. Thank you.
Andrew, can we kick off with you then?
Thank you. This is certainly not meant to be critical. It's more illustrative, what I'm going to say, and it's certainly not for you because you've been kind of stand in, but I would appreciate if you could take them back. Because this report has been coming to us for a while now. I know it is a slow process. But every time I get this report, I was at the Basildon Business Group 3 months ago, and the key thing on their criteria and their agenda was what's happening about, digital inclusion. We don't see anything. We're having problems. When I get residents ringing me up from Pitsea saying, what's happening? My business is suffering right now because I don't have digital connectivity. And when you go back to Billericay, which you'd think is some sort of font of hanging baskets and beautifulness, it's like a black hole of the internet. You can't get a signal. You can't. Taxi drivers are constantly complaining that their PDAs drop out, so they can't charge their customers. It's a real issue. So what I'm saying, I guess, is what would be useful, I think, going forwards is if we could have some sort of map and see how it rolls out as we go, so that we've got an idea of the onslaught of digital inclusion, as it were, across South Essex, if that's something that could be done.
Thank you. I had a similar comment, but I just wanted to take it on a level. We kind of talk about maps. We know that we've got 190 public sector buildings around the region that we've enabled. We know we've got, I've read in this report about this not spot identification, so we know where the black holes are technically. And it says this model is now being produced and is being kept up to date as the data changes. And then we've got this other overlay of the 5G coverage as well. And I just think it'd be helpful just to build on Andrew's suggestion. I'm sure he's thinking the same way. Is where we've just had a presentation, a visual one. We look at the same report. And it feels a bit samey, doesn't it? Over and over. I think you're right. But actually, to be able to get in and say, where are the black holes? How does that overlay with the 190 public sector buildings? And this comes to my other point: is how good are we at enabling those? Because I had an email from a broadband provider that's listed in this report, B-Fibre, earlier this week or last week, where they've identified mainly our housing stock, but about 30 public buildings where they need wayleaves to get these things done. So here's the other bureaucracy thing, that we need to focus on this, because if you start to overlay the black holes with the public sector buildings that are enabled, then we can say, okay, so we've got an opportunity in that black spot to get this problem fixed. How are you getting on, Basildon, with the wayleave process on that building to get the thing sorted out? Because unless we start kicking the doors down and doing kicking these obstacles over that are going to get in the way of enabling these things and spreading the broadband, getting the fibre lit, as they call it, according to this report, then we're going to struggle. So I think we need to have it much more action-based, this report. And I think looking at overlay maps would be really powerful. And we're not going to deal with it now, but I really want to get our head around who's responsible. More than likely, for 190 public sector buildings, there's probably a wayleave process to get these guys in to do what they need to do to spread the joy, so to speak, of this full fibre enablement. So much more action-based, but maps with overlays showing how we're progressing would be good. There is progress here, and I want to acknowledge that. And again, this is just to be taken away, but certainly it'd be good to see this presented differently next time. I think the report is not wrong, but a bit more action-based where we can look at progress and talk about progress, particularly in areas, Councillor Blackwell's not with us, but, if you look at the level of rollout in Castle Point, let's focus on that and say, okay, is that a black spot issue? Have we not got any enabled buildings in there? If we have, what are we doing to get those functioning in the way they should to deliver for the communities around them? So that was my comment. If we can certainly take that away, I think we're on the same page, Andy. Mark.
Well, I was just going to mention, because of 2.1 column, and obviously I agree with you about the maps and that, but the worrying thing is Castle Point. If we've got an ambition to deliver 2025 100%, and it's sitting at 9.9% at the moment, it'd be interesting to see where that is and what the issues are and what that big knot is, because, and I'd I understand it's easy to do. Basildon, Thurrock and Southend have had traditionally cable in for many, many years, so it's much easier to deliver them. It's them other areas outside that, like the Billericay's, the Allsits, or the outside the conurbations, and it makes it difficult. We've got a great ambitious target of 100%. We are 2 and a bit years away, and it looks like Castle Point or some of our outlying areas need that concentration and that maps to see us going forward.
Angie, do you want to comment on the particular issues in Castle Point?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this has been an ongoing conversation between the project work stream and colleagues at Castle Point for some while. There is a historic reason why Castle Point lags slightly behind the other authorities in relation to the fact that virgin fibre is already prevalent in the area, and so there was a degree of waiting for virgin effectively to take up some of that slack. As we move forward, I know, having met just last week with colleagues from City Fibre, that they are beginning the process of moving into the borough in 2024. There remain some challenges geographically and functionally in delivering full fibre broadband into Canvey Island. But as far as the rest of the borough is concerned, there is a projected catch-up. Some of the challenges around the public building connectivity come from the fact that the mainland part of the borough is not parished, and sometimes that makes it more difficult to contact community halls and other public buildings. But those that are within the significant public ownership have already been included as part of that initial rollout.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's any more, I'm conscious of time. This was item 5, but we've had 3 sort of fairly detailed updates in the mix of that. I know there was individual recommendations on each update, but if I can take it that we've all noted the progress, there's some really, I think, some quite exciting things to come back when we meet again in June, and certainly some different ways of presenting the information, so it's more action-based, would be very, very helpful. Given some of the challenges. So, okay, let me move on. If that's all agreed, which I believe it is, let's move on to item 6, which is the financial update. Okay, sorry, Elizabeth, sorry, your name was just hidden behind the jacket in front of you, but I'd forgotten for a moment.
My jacket, sorry.
I blame the Vice Chair, yeah.
Sorry.
Elizabeth, over to you.
There we go. Thank you very much. So, this year we are forecasting a surplus of £149,000, and that will bring our overall deficit to be carried forward into the new year to £24,000. That's because we've had some additional funding secured from National Highways to pay for our programme manager. You'll notice 23-24 doesn't reflect all of the conversations that have been held here, particularly the programme resources. So for the next meeting, I will be working through that and putting in some estimates. So I will be presenting 23-24 and 24-25, bearing in mind the discussions we've had previously about having the longer term outlook. Grant funding has been flowing, particularly from Homes England, as there's been concern previously around their funding. And we've also had funding from ASELA that should be winging its way into Southend's bank account shortly, that was quite cutting it fine.
Charitable donation. Sorry, Elizabeth.
That's right.
I'll be in the process of finalising the year-end position, which may change that number slightly as final spend goes through and grant claims get submitted. So I think that's it. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. I think it's interesting, a lot of the items we've talked about today, there's opportunities for funding down the line. Maybe not too far down the line, but as we start to realise some of those things and see some of the individual programmes expand under their own steam, their own funding, then obviously, am I right in just saying that we would see this, in terms of where we identify income from other partners now, if we get other people who are investing, other organisations investing, we'll just show those as separate lines in the update. Because it'd be quite nice to see this start to expand. And I get the sense from the meeting today, that particularly the meeting Jonathan and I had earlier in the week, that this could start to happen and we could start to deliver in some of those programme areas. But and then we can really start motoring, because we're still talking relatively small numbers for a very large geography with a very wide scope of ambition. But anyway, that's just an observation or comment from me, nothing really to ask in answer to that, but just anticipating that growing over time will be a mark of our success as we start to see more money coming in and more turnover, the expansion of the teams that need to be funded and all those other things, because we're not here to expand teams for expand teams' sake. We're here because we need people to actually deliver things for South Essex. So, Scott.
Yeah, excellent point, Chairman. One of the things I've said, and we said we'll pick up the new year with Elizabeth as well, is there. So just on the seats programme we touched on earlier, yep, we can identify the Freeport funding within this, but more importantly, we need to demonstrate the apprenticeship levy and all the other resources that are going into the skills programme. Although it's not direct money, it's still money that is flowing into the area, into our programme. So we need to really focus on not just the direct pounds and pence, but some of the other funding and resources that are being primed into the programme. So that's something we'll pick up for the future reports, Chairman.
I think so, because I'm hoping that it will start to snowball. That's my sense, and we'll start talking some bigger numbers from diverse sources of income over time. That will be a mark of our success, and then the fruit of that cash coming in is what we'll all want to celebrate, really. Is there any other comments or questions on the financial item? If not, we've been asked to note the report, and I take it from the room that we're happy to do so. So, Elizabeth, thank you again for that. We're in a good place, and I think I'm optimistic that we could go forward and be in an even stronger place. So let me move on to the next item, which is item 7, which is communications. Karen, are you going to lead on this for us?
If I can make the microphone work, yes, I will. Thank you, Chair. This paper very much builds on the other agenda items, actually, particularly the reset and the discussion around resources, but also the communication and engagement opportunities from the programmes themselves. One of the main opportunities is to develop an overarching communication strategy moving forward. And that's something that we would look to bring back to the first joint committee in the new municipal year. What I've tried to reflect in the report is some of the things that leaders and colleagues have fed back at previous meetings that I think the communication strategy and new approach could bring together. So overarching key messages, stakeholder mapping, I think is really key, and we've touched on from some of the programmes where there are real opportunities to work with different stakeholders who will have a different audience to the local authorities, and again spreading the word and the profile of the work that ASELA is doing, but also to develop communication plans for each of the work streams. And I think Jonathan's update is a really good example, setting out where the key milestones and opportunities are moving forward so that we're ready when those opportunities arise. Building on some of the events, so again, there was some really good traction on LinkedIn from the event that yourself, Chair, and Jonathan attended earlier this week. So there's opportunities for us to be proactive through things like the LGA conference, but also where we are able to go and talk about some of the specific work programmes. And we've talked a lot about expanding our digital channels, video content, and expanding that more broadly. So again, exploring opportunities there, and engagement with the media. Again, we've got some really good kind of technical kind of trade opportunities from where the work programmes are now, but also how do we ensure that our local media colleagues who may follow our council, individual council activities, are more engaged in the joint committee and the work of ASELA. So the strategy will pull all of that together. That doesn't pause any activity in the meantime, as Scott touched on earlier. There are opportunities from some of the items today and releases in train to go out this afternoon, as well as the newsletter, which goes to all councillors across South Essex and a wide range of stakeholders. So again, that will summarise the reset, some of the successes that we touched on earlier, things like the Thames Freeport announcement, and go out to a really wide audience. The further opportunity, which is linked to resources, so we don't have a dedicated comms officer for ASELA now. We've worked over the last few weeks with comms colleagues across all the local authorities to engage them in the work of ASELA and to particularly support some of the work programmes. So, for example, the seats release, I was going to say SEATs then, the seats release has been developed and led by Essex comms colleagues working with Scott and their leader. So that's a good example of how that's worked well. And again, we've seen in the last couple of weeks increased engagement in our social media channels, particularly LinkedIn, and not just because of the corporate content that's been posted, but the content from individuals attending events and celebrating some of the news. So hopefully that's a positive step forward, still more to do, and I think the communication strategy and approach that we'll bring back to the next joint committee will formalise some of that, but there are some tangible opportunities set out in the report that will continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes, I think it's a good way forward. There is an item there that if you look at 2.6 and then the opportunities and the policy and framework, and that's obviously I writing to Secretary of States, ministers, and talking about how it works, and then obviously the press releases following that, combined with the 5 leaders, continuously makes it more newsworthy, and the 6 leaders, sorry. Now we can actually make it newsworthy. It's joint statements, joint letters. Just make it more interesting in individual boroughs, and then gets better conversations locally and and across the whole area. And if you look at 2 major announcements in the last few months, you've got ULEZ is identified here as it's affecting us all locally here. Talking to the Mayor of London as 5 and through this body will be much more of influence and much more success to get into negotiations before this comes in August and affecting it if it's done through this body. And in press release and be more newsworthy. The Lower Thames Crossing pause last week, the statement from not just from Thurrock or a statement from Essex or any individual boroughs could be a very good statement to have from this area, that we welcome the extra time to actually make our representations and items that would give us a better opportunity to actually influence decision making as 5. So I think there's some great opportunities being arose there, that we can actually use policy decisions and policy directions that we do here as statements and as press releases.
I'll come to you, Andy. I was going to pick up on the 2 things together. You're right, there are some big stories that we can piggyback on. This council, just to give you one example, made a bit of a thing about the ULEZ just in the last week or so, and it's really caught on as a story. So if we were to do the same thing, we can ride the wave of some of these big items. The point I was going to make is, because we are 7 authorities with different leaders, maybe different opinions on some of these things, with different political makeup, it's great to have these statements, but we've just got to make sure that we're aligned, because one of the last thing I want is something to go out and you go, Chris, I don't agree with that. So we need to have a mechanism, Karen, that maybe we need to feed in, or we come out and we propose something comes from central from comms, it's proposed, as this is what we're thinking about saying, is there any objections? Because we've got an objection, I'll come to you, Scott, yeah. We'll have a problem, and then we could cause some problems within the joint committee, which we don't want. But On that note, I don't know if we've said anything on the LTC delay or the rephasing. How do we word that? Is that an opportunity to improve the scheme, or do we look at it because we're disappointed because we're set back? So can we work specifically on an LTC story, seek agreement from the political members of the Joint Committee? Can we do something on the ULEZ, because there's momentum out there at the moment? You're right, Scott. The reason Mark, the reason we get together, the reason we came together is to have this bigger voice. It's more impactful. So we should capitalise on that. So I know they're mentioned here, but can we actually take the actions away to work on those two in particular? A couple of other quick questions from me. When is the member newsletter due to go out again across South Essex, all members?
Thank you. It's due to go out after the joint committee, so it would go out later today. So we're trying to get out ahead of pre-election period. Yep, all good to go.
More from me. It says LGA conference. Are ASELA planning to have an individual presence at the LGA conference in July or whenever it is?
Thank you. Yes, so we've made an application to be part of the innovation zone, and unless Scott tell me otherwise, we've not heard back, but we have applied to be part of that at the LGA conference.
Good. I had Andy and I had Scott indicating as well.
Yeah, I think we've got a fantastic team. This is part of the feedback sandwich now. I think we've got a fantastic team. I think they're, going in the right direction of travel. And one of the things we're talking about here is the direction of travel. But, we've got ASELA, an exciting, vibrant organisation with vision that wants to deliver for our residents. We've got a comms strategy, which is dull as dishwater and actually sort of gradually bringing itself out of the 20th century into the 21st. Now, I major on comms with companies and going out in the private sector and how they revitalise and get their comms out. And, for instance, we should be having a Facebook page, in my humble opinion, and that Facebook page should then be something that we can actually link professionally to other organisations. We were talking about RSLs earlier. We could be linking in with that. The same with our comms strategy on Twitter. We should be following all of the major players that we want to engage with. And we should have a mechanism set up via Hootsuite or something else where we can send topical tweets out without even having to spend officer resource, because you can pre-program it up to a year ahead. And then when we've got ULEZ, you can factor something else in with that as well, so that you're building up your followers, you're building up your ability of people to take you seriously. That then drives your comms strategy through to your website, to your Facebook, and to LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, in my humble opinion, is really good for people that are looking for a job currently. It's not particularly effective for news or social media or anything else. And then you expand outward to say, how do we engage young people? And I don't want to sound like I'm sort of a TikTok fanatic, but TikTok isn't just for youth people that want to listen to the latest pop song. There's a number of educational things on TikTok. It's really ramping up now how to actually encourage youth to engage with different areas. I was looking at one the other day, which is engaging, for instance, youth to vote. TikTok is becoming a really active social media influencer. And what we should be doing as an organisation is influencing as well as getting our message out. So I think there's a real lot of work to be done. And I look forward to seeing it all being explored and followed through.
Yes, Chairman, just building on the points that members said. I mean, two things. Well led by Karen, but I'm conscious that, again, come back to our capacity. We've got all of the comms leads now being involved, and we will grow that. And so to pick up all the points, we've got a connected team. But it's really important, you've just described the reason you and Councillor Coxall, why we do need that director in post, so they can pick up these points, coordinate across, manage the leaders at a level rather than a comms officer who is coordinating that. So you've just given another outcome and a reason why we need that role, members. So the quicker we can fill that role, the better we'll be able to coordinate and challenge government and try and bring further investment in, either through ASELA or through government around it, the OI for the Great Rescue Devolution bid. So we've got a strong voice, we just need to build on it, and that role will be able to do so.
Definitely. Okay, two sort of final thoughts from me, and then I'll close this item off. I don't think there's anyone else looking to speak. On page 42, we've got the slightly tweaked brand. I agree with the rationale about that. can I just take it that that is agreed? There might be further conversations down the line about what we're called. So this is a micro step. Can we just agree that that is the new logo, where we've dropped the 2050 effectively, because we're delivering well ahead of 2050, as we've discussed today? And then can I just request that we start to use that on everything we print and produce? Is the website up to date? Have we changed the logos on social media, etc., etc.? So there's that. Yeah, that's agreed. Was Councillor Cockshaw were you going to?
Over the moon with that.
I've been asking for it for 5 years. When it got further out, I didn't want it. So pleased.
Very good. Okay, so there's that one. And then finally, I might have forgotten the last point I was going to make. Andrew's just reminded me and whispered in my ear. I don't know. I think it happened about 3 years ago, and I've just kind of carried on with it. But let's just look at this. The way we've structured it, you've got your 5 work programmes, you've aligned a chief exec and a leader to everyone, and there are 2 leaders that are not aligned to work programme, and that is the vice chair and the chairman. So we kind of sit outside of that. But comms, in my view, are kind of taking it with me anyway. But as we might see some changes, or are going to see some changes, I just think, can we just agree that whoever chairs ASELA is ultimately should be leading on the comms piece and working with the other members of the board to seek agreement, as we did on certain, we've just discussed on items, working with yourselves as officers with the content, signing off. So can we just agree that it will always, should always be the chair, as long as the chair is up for it and up for it and up to it, of course. But that's just, can we take that as read? All right, Andy?
Yeah.
All right. So unless there's anything else, let's close off the comms piece. I'm glad. You know, I still see the opportunity to massively get into gear on this one. And I've said it over and over, there's a collective effort, because whenever we're doing something on social media ourselves, Jonathan's good at it, cross-pollinating, tagging in ASELA and different councils and different names of different people. I think Andy made a good point, actually us going out and following others. So, you know, when we sat in a room the other day, on Tuesday, with a load of potential investors, corporates, let's get them following us and us following them, and they're like, you know, it will just start to happen. I disagree with you slightly about LinkedIn, but I think LinkedIn's quite a good space. Somebody said to me the other day, he was a businessman, it's very conservative and it's quite functional, but it's not necessarily. And if you're going to be on Twitter, you've got to have something to say, and fairly regularly. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, it's kind of about the stakeholder mapping and understanding your audiences. And LinkedIn has an audience, some of which are other local authorities, government departments, spreading the kind of local government words, and clearly, you know, Instagram, TikTok, different demographics, and we should be targeting the content to those different channels. It shouldn't be the same messages for each of those, and I completely agree. I think there's a real opportunity to up our game on those moving forward.
Well, case in point, as we come to September with seats, which is predominantly around young people, let's make a shift to actually promote that in that space where young people are looking at that, where they're looking for employment, they're looking to embark on their career. So let's really use seats as a case in point to get into these other spaces. Andy, I'm sure you'll give plenty of feedback at that time as to where we should be, but that's the one for me. Okay, let's close that item off. That brings us to, I'm going to ask you questions. We've got item 8, which is the business engagement arrangements. To me, there's elements of this that are already confidential. And I just think it's going to be hard to go into this item and keep it in the public space without drifting into other areas. So I'm going to take advice on it. Are we going to try and keep it public, or are we going to go into confidential for the item as a whole? Because there are some elements in it that are going to be sensitive. What's the view? I'm looking to you, Scott, really. I don't know why, but I need a monitoring officer to tell me what's the best way to approach it. Angela, what would you say?
Thank you, Chair. If you intend to discuss any of the contents in the confidential papers, then yes, members should indicate that they wish to raise that, and then we can go into private at that point. But if you don't, then there's no reason, because the paperwork is already in the public domain.
Stephen, did you want to make a comment at this point?
Yes, basically,
Simple as that. Whole thing confidential.
Yeah, I tended to think that way, because I've seen
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I totally agree. I think it should. However, with your indulgence, before we do move into part two, I would like to raise a very quick item, if that's possible.
that was going to be my next point. So can we just agree then? Let's all members of the joint committee, are we agreeing to put the whole item into confidential part two? Yeah, is that agreed? Mark, you comfortable with that? Okay, so so that's that agreed. And then if we were to agree to do that, was exactly what I wanted to do, is come to you and say, let's deal with any other business or any other items before Cameron shuts the camera off, so to speak. So over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it was 3 years ago, but it feels like 10, that you took over as Chairman of ASELA. And in that time, I think ASELA has come on leaps and bounds. I think we've made some real progress. We've had some real examples of delivery, and there's been a real culture change and freshness about the approach you've given. And I'm very much aware that this is probably your last meeting, and I think it would be wrong if we didn't acknowledge the work, the effort, the sweat, the blood, the tears that you put in, not only with ASELA, but in your capacity as leader of Brentwood for your residents, and to say publicly, thank you, and we wish you the very best in whatever you go on to, potting plants or whatever it is you're going to move on to when we finish. So thank you very much, and best of luck.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I probably should respond, not to take the platform to do it, but just before we close the camera off, is for me just to say, look, I appreciate your kind comments, but this is a team, we're a joint committee, there's lots of individuals around this room running off doing different themes, different programs that are, you know, projects of significance in their own right, let alone if you put it under the umbrella of ASELA. And so I guess what I'd like to do is say two things. One, thank you for all the effort that's gone in, because it doesn't happen alone. It's easy to chair a meeting by and large, but all the effort goes into producing the reports, providing the updates and everything that goes on behind the scenes. So that's not lost on me. And the second point I would obviously say is to wish you all every success, because I'm still, you know, yes, I'm going to retire from politics, but I'm still hugely passionate about South Essex. I see the potential of the place, and I'd love to see it succeed. And I really would be I would love to follow on social media exactly the progress that you're making, because I'm anticipating some really exciting stuff even in the very near future. And I hope you can continue to deliver that. We'll see what May brings, but I think ASELA's got enough momentum and enough clarity around what we're wanting to do and why, that nobody's not going to buy into it. And so, yeah, I wish you all every success, and I'll be watching on social media to see how you get on. And, yeah, I don't know what else to say, really, but thank you, Andrew, for those comments, and thank you all for working together as a team, and I've enjoyed your support. Thank you very much. Okay, so, Cameron, can you do what you need to do technically, and then tell us when we're in that place, and then we'll get on with item 8? Is that... So ended the live streaming, and then normal, what we do in a confidential session. Pause whatever you're doing. Don't pull the pin out of it yet. Sorry, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to remind everyone that the expression of interest for the devolution deal will go in tomorrow, pending obviously full council sign-off at Southend. So thank you for everyone who's contributed to that. We're getting letters of support in from businesses, from the ICSs and others during the day. They're still coming in, but we'll share that full deck. But it's quite an important moment. It's obviously another element of the ASELA work. And we're meeting as chief execs later on today to discuss the next steps. So just to sort of note that, and thanks, Chris, to everyone involved.
Yeah, Tom, you're right to do it. And my focus was caught up in the moment. It was very ASELA focused for obvious reasons. But of course, this is a piece of the bigger picture, the Greater Essex deal what we're pitching to government for as a whole with our other leader partners in the north of Essex as well. So of course, when I say I wish ASELA well and everything it's doing, of course I do, but I wish the whole county well, because this is a key part of that. So you're right to bring that. Thank you for the update. And I know when we meet as a joint committee, or when you meet as a joint committee again in June or whenever it is, that'd be great to see what the progress is on that. So I wish the broader county and everyone involved in the county as a whole well on those ambitions. Thank you.